Good evening and welcome to the Writer's Block. I'm your host, John Ronan, and as you know by now, during our half-hour shows, I interview writers about their craft, what they've done in the past, what they're publishing now, what they might have planned for the future. It's actually a wider net than just writers, though. We've had all sorts of other artists on. We've had painters, we've had actors, musicians, sculptors, all kinds of people. So if you have an idea for someone who might be right for the Writer's Block, watch for our address at the end of the show. Also watch for the address yatesgame.org, the URL address yatesgame.org. There's some information in there about the Yates Game, a play which premiered in Gloucester 3 years ago and is now going to open in New York, and I'd like you to know something about that. I'm very happy to say this evening we have a gentleman by the name of John Grant, and he is a multi-talented artist. He is a writer, he is an excellent photographer, and an excellent researcher and historian. John is originally from Whitestone, New York, in the frontiers of northern Queens. He went to St. Helena High School in the Bronx, and later migrated a little bit south down to Brooklyn, where he was for many years in the music business, first as a musician, later as an engineer. He now lives in Pennsylvania, near Wilkes-Barre, but he is planning with his wife to move to Cape Ann as soon as possible because he loves this area. And without further ado, I want to welcome you, John Grant, to the Writer's Block.
Thank you, John. Nice introduction. Thank you very much. Considering the subject of my book,
Well, yes.
I'm happy to be anywhere.
Let's go to the book immediately. I want to ask a general question about your background, but with that segue, I think this would be appropriate. Final Thoughts, Eternal Beauty in Stone.
Correct.
Is the title of this book, which is one of the most gorgeous books we've ever had on the show. It is, well, I won't say what it is. You say what it is. Tell me what Final Thoughts is about.
It's the synthesis of my cemetery photography and epitaphs, or engraved sayings on stones that one may find. For instance, remember me as you pass by, as you are now, so once was I. As I am now, so shall you be. Prepare for death and follow me. I have many like that, but I also have many lighter ones. 'Twas hard to give thee up, or life is not the number of breaths you take. It's the moments that take your breath away, like that. So it spans the last 300 years of America's ritual of death, saying goodbye, taken from cemeteries from New York up to the New England area.
It's not just New England. You say in the introduction, it's northeast corner.
Northeast
of
corner.
The United States.
Yeah. Well, I was living down in New York at the time, so I started there. And I lived up in New England, or in Cape Ann, as a matter of fact, for a number of years before moving to West Pittston. But so my area of documentation would be considered from, I think my most northernmost shot would be Portsmouth, New Hampshire, down to the 5 boroughs of New York. I have a couple from Pennsylvania, and there are a number from, since my daughter is a graduate of Rochester Institute of Technology, major in photography, I took some shots out at their Mount Hope Cemetery and Holy Sepulchre, which are amazing.
I'm interested in your background is New York City
Right.
background, Whitestone area,
Right.
Near the Whitestone Bridge, as you
Sure,
pointed out before.
exactly.
And then Brooklyn.
Correct.
How did you decide, or what made you evolve to change careers and to move out of the city?
I had spent close to 30 years in the music business, but when the 90s hit, all heck broke loose. Between the internet downloads and the record companies complaining about, or going belly up, if you will, artists recording in their homes. There was no need for major studios, and there were artists all over the place. Everybody wanted to be a rock star. So it just got too insane for me, and it was time to go. It really was time for me to leave the business. I left the business in the mid-90s. I tried a few other jobs, but the one that really struck home with me, I was a fundraiser out at Ellis Island for the Wall of Honor. that was sort of an introduction to genealogy for me. So I started researching my family roots. Obviously, one of the stops one has to make when you're researching family roots are cemeteries. What the living don't know or refuse to tell the dead, more obliging. So I went off to the cemetery with pencil, paper, and camera in hand. I marched off to the cemetery. That was my introduction. Once there, I found these places amazing. I never knew cemeteries to be so comforting, so quiet. When I was a child, we'd go visit Grandma and Grandpa, pull some weeds, lay some flowers, and then run off to Aunt Mary's to have some paella. That was it. That was it. They weren't interested. I wasn't interested until I started researching the roots. And
Did your photography start then too, or had you been taking pictures all your
funny enough,
all your life?
in the 20th century, I was neither a taphophile or a lover of cemeteries, nor a photographer. Never.
So those both evolved after.
Yeah, that was it. I mean, not half, I would say about 30% of that book was shot on a little Olympus, a point-and-shoot camera.
You mentioned several cameras, and the first one was just a point and shoot.
It was just a point and shoot. As a matter of fact, the Mourning Angel, the picture with the red leaves around it, I shot at Greenwood. I think it's one of the first pictures, one of the really early ones. Yeah, that one right there.
That's one of the pictures I have marked. Now this is with a little.
That's an Olympus
$150
point and
Olympus?
shoot, 3.2 meg. Yeah,
This
that's
is.
it.
It's interesting. John mentioned this because I had marked this because it's such a remarkable combination of gray, black and white, and brilliant fall color in the foreground leaves, and it is remarkable that was done with such a basic digital camera.
I know. I'm having that camera bronzed and put on the mantelpiece. I'm telling you, it was wonderful.
Give us that word again. A lover of cemeteries is.
Taphophile.
You spell that for us?
Oh, Taphophile, if I'm not mistaken. I think I'm correct.
Taphophile.
Or just a lover of cemetery. I know there's a Greek end to it. I read it somewhere, but I can't translate it actually. It's from early Greek. Anyway, but taphophile. It's essentially considered a person who visits, loves cemeteries, whether they're there for the symbolism or whether they're there for the just to be there. They just love cemeteries. They're considered taphophiles.
And you were a dedicated taphophile.
I guess so. I wasn't 10 years ago. I certainly am now, especially with the book out. Oh, yes.
When did you first? You said in the 20th century.
Right.
I said you were neither a taphophile nor a photographer. And so in the last 11 years, you have become.
6 or 7 years ago, when I was actually doing the genealogy full speed ahead and going to cemeteries all around the East Coast, because that's essentially where my family is laid out, if you will, I started taking pictures. I mean, I'd finished doing the research that I was there for, and then I'd just walk the cemeteries and start shooting everything else. And I thought, hey, looks pretty good. Show it to some folks in the family. Hey, that looks really good. So I built a little gallery on the internet, just a handmade thing, and people from all over the world, Australia and Boston and Paris, started showing up and saying, that's really good. We like your stuff. Nobody shoots quite like you. So I got a little bigger gallery. And the last 3 years, each of the last 3 years, I've had nearly 200,000 hits at the gallery.
Give us the URL address of
It's
the website.
www.johnthomasgrant.com.
John Thomas Grant, no spaces.
No spaces,
John
straight ahead.
Thomas, John
JOHN, thomasgrant.com. Yep.
Well, your hits will double now from our vast viewing audience.
I don't want to blow up the server, but thank you.
Now, I want to show the front cover again, because I tell you, I was just really, really struck by how beautiful this book was, and I want to make sure our audience.
There's a story with that cover.
Tell us the story. About the
Oh
cover.
yes, there's a story with that cover. I had actually selected another picture. I was in my artsy frame of mind. I had another picture, the lady at Calvary, shot at Calvary Cemetery in Queens, New York. So that's fine. And I was happy with it. And I had the title above her, and she's like this, looking up, and the light's coming down. It's in the book.
Yes.
Anyway, I sent the manuscript, all the pictures of the manuscript, to my publisher. They came back with 2 other covers. One was shot at Forest Hill Cemetery over south of Boston, and the other one is that one. And I fell in love with this one for a couple of different reasons.
And where is this?
This one is First Parish in Rockport, right across from the beach. That's First Parish Cemetery. And the irony of the whole thing is that that is the cemetery that I conceived, not the project, but the title. When I was living here for that 3 years, on a nice day, I'd go sit in that cemetery and write or think or just doodle. And I'd sit with this young gentleman. His name is Timothy Merriman. Timothy Merriman was 19 years old when he passed away in 1836. And I'd sit there with Timmy. And that was, and I'd watch people come and go along Main Street and the beach, and it's just the most lovely cemetery. But on this day, that's New England fog behind it. It was the latter part of the day, and I caught that shot. But when I saw that, when I opened up the package from my publisher to look at a couple of different covers, book covers, I said, wow, yeah, that's it.
The front cover is Rockport, and I was curious to if anybody recognized it before I asked
No one's
you.
come back to me, no.
No?
No, not yet.
I want to make sure we show many of these pictures. I'm going to show again the Weeping Angel,
Yeah, the Mourning Angel.
the Mourning Angel, with the foreground leaves.
Right.
And this is from 1861. 'Twas hard to give thee up.
That's the
is the
epitaph,
inscription
yeah.
underneath. And this photograph is remarkable for me because of the really poignant use of color within the book. Most of the photographs are black and white, I think, with
Then this
color
book-
with color in them.
Most, here, yeah, they're all pretty much color pictures. I do have some black and whites, but they're not natural black and whites. They're color Well, in a cemetery, you either have
They're-
the statues, which are white, and
Maybe
the blend of aging
The-
also helps.
It's shot in color, but the topics
Yeah.
are largely black and white.
Yeah, the
Nice-
topics themselves, yes. The stones, the statues, the monuments would tend to be of a white stone or a marble speckled stone. You'll notice a lot of my statues have the speckling in it. You have the granite and the marble, which
Yes.
feature
Well,
that.
maybe I'll jump ahead. I
Yeah.
wanted to talk about our town, but I'll jump ahead because I have one of the pages marked just for that speckled quality.
There you go.
Granite is a familiar reality here on Cape Ann. And these are just wonderful shots. You tell us about these two.
Well, both
as
of those.
examples of that kind of pointillism
Yeah.
that you're talking about.
Well, both of those two are from Greenwood Cemetery in Brooklyn, New York. Once Mount Auburn was open in Boston here, which is a garden variety cemetery, everybody had to get in on the bandwagon. So everybody had to have one of those garden variety cemeteries, which was based on Père Lachaise in Paris, if you've ever been to that cemetery. That was the first real garden cemetery. So then in America, incorporated back in the 1830s, Mount Auburn in Boston was the first. Wonderful, wonderful place. And I have a bunch of pictures in there from Mount Auburn. But these two were shot in Greenwood Cemetery in Brooklyn, which is a 500-acre. It's amazing. And you were talking about your son in Brooklyn. He's got to get the Greenwood. Yes, he's got to get.
You drive by it forever.
Oh, yes, yes.
These are granite.
Correct. Mm-hmm.
And this is,
Yeah.
and this is, I'm sure this was shot in color. Let's see,
It's
it's the color
they
back
were
here,
both shot in color.
But they are, the subjects themselves are starkly black and white
Black and-
contrast. And
I may have desaturated just a little bit of the color, just to bring out the black and white or get
see
rid of
just
it.
a
Generally, a
little
lot
shade
of yellow
beige
from
over here,
from moss, you'll get a lot of yellow. So I generally desaturate just a little bit, but they were shot in color. The other thing, I want to get back to the camera just a second, which will apply here. These two were shot on a Nikon D300 12.4 meg camera. So I don't want everybody to think that the pictures here were just on this little point and shoot. I dare them to tell the difference. But nonetheless, I was using 30%, let's say in this book, were shot on that Olympus point and shoot in the early days when I was doing genealogical research and kept some of these pictures, but the rest of them were shot on a Nikon D300, which is a bit more extensive and a bit more pro, even if I do shoot it in automatic.
I have no expertise in digital speak, but I know that first camera that you had, there's very little information there. I mean, you have to really, really know what you want.
At the time, I was using Adobe Photoshop CS2. I'm using CS3 now.
So these are many times more dense in the material.
Oh yeah, with the 300.
The breakdown of the light.
Right, exactly. Exactly.
There is I have the same page marked for another reason.
Right.
In the introduction, you talk about our town.
Right.
And I'd like you to tell us why. For
Well,
viewers
it's
who haven't
Act
seen
3.
it
The viewers must see it. Thornton Wilder's play, Act 3, where Emily, she dies in childbirth, and she's given an opportunity to relive one day of her life. And the other spirits tell her, you really don't want to do that. Can't explain it to you, but you really don't. But she wants to do it.
Because some of them have tried it.
They tried that. Oh my gosh, they tried that. And so she picks a day. I believe it was her 12th birthday she picked. And she went back, and she was just struck by the lack, even though as a living being she felt love, she thought, but as now a spirit with one day left, it was sort of lacking. And she couldn't take it anymore, so she went back. But nonetheless, do people really live a life? Was her question to the others. And she just couldn't come to terms with the fact that people having this wonderful, precious opportunity of life squandered it in menial tasks of cooking breakfast and so, which you have to do, but nonetheless, the affection, the emotional attachment was lacking.
That's like the quotation that you cited earlier. It's not so much the breathing, it's what takes away your breath.
Right, the moments that take away your breath. A lot of people look at A lot of people look at cemeteries as parks or museums. A lot of people look at cemeteries as icky, gooey, creepy places. I look at them as home. They're home. It's as simple as that. There's a husband and there's a wife. There's the other picture, and we'll get to that in a second, the husband and wife stone. There's the son, there's a daughter, there's grandma, there's aunt, there's uncle. It's home. And I try to express that through my photography, that no matter, the flesh is gone, but the spirit still sort of lives.
Yeah.
You know, the spirit of life, of home, still exists. Even in a cemetery, they still exist. So,
I like that phrasing you're using there, because I was struck by this book's there's a tension in there. We're in a cemetery. Everybody is dead.
Right.
But there's so much beauty in here, so much pathos, and so much good writing in many of the epitaphs that it's almost joyful to go through.
Thank you.
It's kind of a tension between
life is a beautiful
grief
thing.
and
don't squander it. Yes.
I certainly want to talk about whatever items you want to point to, but this struck me for its color again.
Mount Hope.
Some of the highlighting color, which accents the stones.
Right.
And I think you like that color to the top on the horizon.
I do.
You use that a couple times. It's extremely effective. Very
Thank you.
beautiful.
Yeah, technically I pull a little yellow out, I put a little cyan in, and I would go and sit on that stone on the right, well, the pedestal to the
This here.
stone. I would just go sit there in that little valley.
Where
It's
is
Mount Hope in Rochester, New York. It's a stunning cemetery. There's an old part and there's a new part, but it has a lot of hills and dales, a lot of valleys in Mount Hope. It's a small place, but it's the valleys are accentuated by the hills, and you can find little peaceful places like this just to sit and think and be
Is it
comforted.
a very old cemetery?
It is.
What is the most recent grave site photographed in here? And what is the most ancient?
Oh gosh. I mean, I have some, the oldest one I can think of in there was probably shot at the Salem Burying Ground in Medford, Mass. I believe it dates to about 1686. I also have, I believe, one in there from the Burying Point in Salem. The most recent, gosh, there's a young lady in there, Susan Emile, that I shot in Carverton Cemetery in Pennsylvania. She was one day old, and it's her stone lying. She has a flat stone, and it's just her date of death with a little lamb. There's a little white flower next to it, and she was probably, that was 1962, her death. So she was born and she died, yeah. That's probably the most recent one I have in this particular book, as far as the graveyard or cemeteries are concerned.
Alex just gave me the 5-minute signal, so I'm going to have to begin to...
Most of the cemeteries are from the Victorian period, the late 19th century, early 20th century.
And we talked about these,
Yep.
and I want to show the shadow light contrast on a couple of these.
Right.
I could show every picture in here, of course, but some of these just struck me. And the one on the viewer's right here, on my left hand, would you describe that beautiful shadow light contrast in the tomb itself?
That's all natural. I don't work with synthetic light, if you will, or light stands or any of that. That's the sun, that's nature, that's the universe lighting for me. I just happen to be in the right place at the right time. I did darken it a bit, but everything you see there is there. That's all exposure setting for me. But all that light is from the sun. That's where this one was shot. The resting angel was shot at Mount Auburn Cemetery here in Cambridge. She's also on the back cover from a slightly different angle. A little closer and from down below, but that's all.
Now, that's all natural. You said you have to happen to be there, the right place at the right time, but did you have to wait for 5 days for the right time?
No, actually, I was just, I will though.
6 to 7?
I'm telling you, I could look at a stone or a composition of stones and know where I have to be for the right picture or what season I'm looking to do it, and I will come back at that point. I'll go back. That's part of it. It's not a travel log. I take this seriously. But the other picture I wanted to show was on page 23, just more of a fitting example, if you will.
Okay, I just got the 3-minute signal. We're going to have 23.
Page 23. If you can just show that one. That's John Thomas Grant picture. You have the husband, which is engraved on the left. You have the wife stone on the right. You see husband and wife, and he's leaning towards her.
Very nice.
Eternal love.
Very nice.
Isn't it? That's what I look for. I have another one of 3 little kids pointing towards their mother's stone, and she's pointing towards them, or leaning towards them, and they're leaning towards each other, and I love that human aspect to my photography.
I got the 3-minute signal about 2 minutes ago. Where can we get this?
You can get that at Amazon or Barnes & Noble online. You can order it there. I'm working now. It should be in bookstores within the month, so they're talking about November, early December for it to be fully in bookstores.
Okay, so we're
Toad Hall.
We're going to be broadcasting in the new year.
In the new year. Okay, so I got Toad Hall I'm working on right now. The Toad Hall and the bookstore on Main.
Great.
Could get at, and I'm working at a couple of bookstores and all around, essentially, all around, or wherever you'd like.
John Grant,
and I'll be up for signings.
Thank you very much for bringing Final Thoughts to our attention and the viewers of the Writer's Block. I appreciate you coming in.
Thank you very much, John, for the opportunity.
I want to thank our TV audience as well. If you've learned something about John Thomas Grant's art and the art of being a taphophile, then the writer's block has done its job. Thanks again, and I hope to see you next week on the writer's block. Good night.